Welcome back, everyone. We've got quite the collection of source material for this deep dive, all about suppressed technologies.
Yeah, it looks like we've got articles, research papers, even some YouTube links. A real mixed bag.
Yeah, the kind of stuff that often gets dismissed as, conspiracy theories.
Right. Free energy, anti-gravity, the works.
Exactly. So our mission today, to sift through all this, try to separate fact from fiction, see what kernels of truth we can actually extract.
Which is always a challenge in this realm. Lots of speculation, wild claims, but also some genuinely fascinating scientific concepts.
Yeah. Got to approach it with a healthy dose of skepticism, but also, keep an open mind.
Totally. So where do we even begin with all this?
Well, let's start with something relatable, something everyone can get behind: cars.
Okay, cars. What about them?
Specifically, the dream of incredible fuel efficiency, like way beyond what we see on the roads today.
Ah, right, right. The holy grail of getting hundreds of miles per gallon.
Yeah, who would want a car that sips fuel instead of guzzling it?
Absolutely. So are we talking about electric cars or something else?
Not quite. This deep dive takes us back in time, first to the 1930s, and a Canadian mechanic named Charles Pogue.
Pogue, okay. What did he do?
He was obsessed with improving the carburetor, the heart of a gas engine, and came up with something truly amazing.
Some revolutionary new carburetor design.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Called the Pogue carburetor.
Yeah.
Designed to completely vaporize fuel before it entered the engine, which theoretically could lead to massive efficiency gains.
Interesting. So was it just theory or did he actually build it?
He built it. And get this, there are multiple verified tests documented in newspapers and automotive magazines at the time.
Wow, really? What kind of results are we talking about?
A Ford V8 getting over 200 miles per gallon consistently. Imagine filling up your tank once and driving across the country.
That's insane. If that's true, that would have been a game changer.
Right, you'd think so. But here's where things get interesting. Shortly after these test results were published, Pogue's workshop was robbed. All his carburetors, notes, everything gone.
What? Seriously? Just like that?
Yep. And Pogue himself, well, he never spoke about the invention again. Disappeared off the face of the earth, basically.
That's so strange. Okay, so maybe that's just one guy, one story. Bad luck.
Right. But then we jump ahead to the 1970s and meet Tom Ogle.
Another inventor.
Yeah, another fuel efficiency whiz. But his story takes a darker turn.
Oh no. What happened?
So, Ogle was working on a lawnmower engine when he accidentally discovered a way to make it run almost entirely on its own fumes.
On its own fumes, like recycling the exhaust or something?
Pretty much. He modified a Ford Galaxy with this tech and achieved over 100 miles per gallon.
Wow, that's still incredible, even if it's not 200.
Absolutely. And he got a patent for it, investors on board. Everything seemed set for him to become, a star.
Makes sense. So what went wrong?
Well, the U.S. Air Force expressed interest in his invention, and shortly after that, Ogle's life went into a tailspin.
Interesting timing.
The SEC and IRS came after him, investors started fighting, and ultimately he was found dead.
Dead. What happened?
Officially, an accidental overdose. But there were a lot of whispers about foul play, things not adding up.
Yeah, that's definitely suspicious, especially with the Air Force being involved.
Right, and get this. That same year, 1978, the U.S. and Saudi Arabia solidified the petrodollar deal.
Ah, right. Linking oil transactions to the U.S. dollar.
Exactly. Suddenly, fuel-efficient technology becomes a potential threat to a massive geopolitical system.
So you're saying Ogle's invention may have been suppressed to protect the petrodollar?
It's a theory, right? But the timing is certainly interesting.
Yeah, two inventors, decades apart, both claiming incredible fuel efficiency, both encountering these mysterious setbacks.
Makes you wonder, right? Coincidence? Or is there something more going on here?
Definitely makes you think, are these isolated incidents or early examples of disruptive tech being squashed before it could take hold?
And what are the implications if that's true? What does it mean for the advancement of technology, our dependence on fossil fuels, the balance of power in the world?
All huge questions, no easy answers, but definitely worth exploring further as we continue this deep dive.
Okay, so next up, we're taking fuel efficiency to a whole new level. Cars that supposedly run on water. Enter Stanley Meyer.
So Stanley Meyer, huh? This guy was all over the news back in the 90s claiming he could, power cars with water.
Yeah, the water fuel cell, right. I vaguely remember that.
Yeah, basically. Now, electrolysis, using electricity to split water into hydrogen and oxygen, is a real thing, and you can use those gases to power an engine.
Right, I remember that from science class, but wasn't Meyer claiming something like beyond regular electrolysis?
Exactly. He insisted his water fuel cell could use just ordinary tap water, not, the highly purified stuff needed for typical electrolysis. And he said he only needed like tiny amounts of water to power a car, which seems to go against basic physics.
Right. Yeah. So how did he explain that? Was there any, like, scientific basis for his claims?
Well, he was pretty vague on the technical details, which makes it hard to assess the, validity of his invention. And it's important to remember, like, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And in this case, the evidence is mostly anecdotal.
Okay, but I mean, he did have some engineers and journalists who, like, witnessed his car running on water.
Yeah, there are those accounts, but then during a celebratory dinner with investors, Meyer suddenly fell ill and died.
Oh, wow. Really? What happened?
Officially a brain aneurysm. But the circumstances, surrounding his death fueled all sorts of conspiracy theories.
Yeah, I bet. Didn't Meyer also have some other device, like a donut-shaped electromagnetic thing?
Oh, yeah, that's right. And that thing was actually classified under, national security by the U.S. government.
Seriously, what was it supposed to do?
Well, Meyer claimed it could tap into this whole other energy source, zero-point energy.
Okay, now we're getting into some really out there stuff.
Yeah.
What exactly is zero-point energy anyway?
Well, it's a concept from quantum physics, the study of how things work at the atomic and subatomic level.
Right.
And the basic idea is that even in a perfect vacuum at the absolute coldest temperature possible, there's still a tiny bit of energy present due to these things called quantum fluctuations.
Quantum fluctuations, like tiny particles popping in and out of existence.
Exactly. And those fluctuations, create this background energy field throughout the universe.
Okay, so this zero-point field is a real thing.
It is. It's a real phenomenon, but mainstream science is extremely skeptical about the idea of harnessing this energy.
Why is that? If it's everywhere, shouldn't we be able to use it?
Well, for one thing, it seems to violate the laws of thermodynamics, which govern energy transfer and are pretty fundamental to, our understanding of physics.
So are we talking like perpetual motion here?
Essentially, yeah, and perpetual motion machines, despite many attempts throughout history, have never been, proven to work.
But still, if this zero-point energy is all around us, wouldn't it be amazing if we could tap into it?
Oh, it would be revolutionary. Imagine a world with, limitless clean energy. But the science just isn't there yet.
Yet we keep hearing about all these inventors who claim to have built devices that do exactly that, tap into this energy, right?
We do, but these claims often lack, rigorous scientific testing and peer review, which are essential for validating any scientific discovery.
Right, and a lot of these inventors work in isolation, which makes it, even harder to separate genuine breakthroughs from wishful thinking.
Exactly. It's a tough field to navigate, for sure.
So let's talk about some of those inventors. There's Howard Johnson with his magnetron motor that's supposedly ran for almost 20 years with, minimal energy loss.
And Thomas Murray claiming to generate, 50,000 watts of power from seemingly nothing.
And then there's Edwin Gray, whose over Unity motor was apparently verified by scientists, but then his lab was raided and all his work disappeared.
It's fascinating to consider these stories, for sure, but it's important to approach them with, a critical eye. Where's the solid evidence? Has any of this been independently verified? Those are the questions we need to ask.
But it almost feels like there's this pattern, disruptive technology, incredible claims. Then the inventor is, silenced, their work confiscated.
Yeah, it does make you wonder why all the secrecy and, strong-arm tactics if these inventions were truly bogus.
Right. Unless there was something real there, something powerful interests didn't want the public to know about.
It's the big question, isn't it? Is this evidence of a conspiracy to suppress these technologies, or are there other explanations for why these stories, persist?
Well, our next case involves an inventor named Floyd Sparky Sweet and his vacuum triode amplifier, or VTA, and this story gets really wild. So Sparky Sweet and his VTA, this thing supposedly could produce enormous wattage from this tiny device. And there's even video footage of it powering lights and fans seemingly out of thin air.
Right, and the story goes that his device wasn't just about generating energy, but also had anti-gravity capabilities.
Anti-gravity. Are we talking flying cars now? This is sounding like, pure science fiction.
It does, right. But the idea of defying gravity, it's actually been around for a while. There's a history of research in this area going back to the early 20th century.
Really? So it's not as far-fetched as it sounds?
Well, far-fetched maybe, but definitely not completely out of the realm of possibility,
Okay, so who were some of the pioneers in this anti-gravity research?
Well, one of the early ones was T. Townsend Brown. He did a lot of work on electrogravitics.
That's right, what?
Electrogravitics. It's the idea that by using like high voltage electric fields, you can create a force that counteracts gravity.
Okay, so like manipulating gravity with electricity.
Exactly. And this wasn't just some fringe theory. In the 1950s, there was actual buzz about G engines and flying cars. Major aerospace companies like Lockheed Martin and Convair were reportedly involved.
Wow, so this was like a serious area of research.
Yeah, it was. But then suddenly, silence. It's as if someone just hit the mute button on this whole field of research.
Like it just disappeared.
Pretty much. Did it really fizzle out? Or did the research go, underground, maybe into those like shadowy black budget programs we hear about?
Hmm. Okay, so what about Dr. Ning? She was doing research on anti-gravity, right? And she had funding from the U.S. Department of Defense.
Yeah, she was a respected physicist. And then in 2001, she vanished, just completely disappeared.
Wow.
And she reappeared 13 years later with severe brain damage.
What? Seriously? So what happened to her during those missing years?
It's a mystery. No one knows for sure, but, it definitely adds to the intrigue.
Okay, so we've got all these stories, suppressed inventions, shadowy figures, technologies that sound almost too good to be true. But the question remains, why? What's the motive behind all this, supposed suppression?
Well, the source material you sent in suggests that those in power, governments, corporations, maybe even a shadow government, they benefit from scarcity.
Meaning, if we had, abundant free energy, it would disrupt the whole system.
Exactly. No more dependence on oil, no more energy wars, no more need for, centralized control over resources.
And those who currently hold that power, they wouldn't want to see that happen, right?
It's a pretty cynical view, but it's not entirely implausible, when
Yeah.
you consider historical patterns of greed and the, pursuit of power.
So what can we do about it? If this suppression is as widespread as some believe, is there any hope of, breaking free?
Well, one idea that was presented in your source material is pretty radical but interesting, open sourcing these technologies.
Open sourcing meaning.
Like make the blueprints, the research, everything freely available online for anyone to access and replicate.
Wow, that's a bold idea.
Yeah.
It's like a technological jailbreak, bypassing the traditional systems of, control and suppression.
Right. If the information's out there freely accessible, it becomes much harder to contain.
I can see that, but wouldn't there be challenges? Like verifying the legitimacy of those designs, ensuring safety and practicality.
Definitely, those are hurdles that would need to be, overcome.
But it's a compelling idea, right? Like a kind of people's science driven by the belief that knowledge should be shared, not hoarded.
Absolutely. And it aligns with the spirit of many of those inventors we've discussed. They weren't in it for the money or the fame. They genuinely wanted to improve the world.
Well, here we are at the end of our deep dive, and it feels like we've only scratched the surface.
Yeah, we've gone from plausible fuel efficiency claims to some truly mind-bending stuff like zero-point energy and anti-gravity.
We've encountered these fascinating stories, intriguing evidence, and some really unsettling questions about the forces that might be, shaping our world behind the scenes.
It really makes you wonder, are all these inventors geniuses misunderstood? Or are they all crackpots? The truth is probably somewhere in between, right?
Probably. But the sheer number of these accounts, the recurring patterns of, suppression, the hints of advanced technologies hidden from view, it makes you think, what if even a fraction of this is true?
Exactly. What does that say about the world we live in? And what responsibility do we have, as individuals to seek out and share knowledge, even if it challenges the status quo, even if it seems impossible?
That's a great question to leave our listeners with. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep an open mind and don't be afraid to, explore the unknown.
And always keep asking questions.